Hi, you guys. Welcome back to Meaningful Motivations with Tracy Erickson. And of course, if you are new to this channel, welcome. My name is Tracy Erickson, and in this video, I'm going to share more notes from heaven with you today. And this time, it's going to be all about comparing the higher self and the lower self. So stay tuned. To give a little background to those of you who are new here, my grandpa actually receives channeled letters from my grandma, who is in heaven. And he shares those letters with me during our special little phone calls that we have. And whenever my grandpa calls with more letters from my grandma, I scribble down as many notes as possible. So in Notes from Heaven, I am just sharing some of what I've learned from those letters from my grandma. And as a little fun fact, ever since my grandma passed away, to pass the time, my grandpa learned to play the guitar. And now he actually writes country music. And he has it produced and published on major music platforms. So if you want to check it out, you can check out James Raymond Country Dreams on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, or any other music platform.
As long as our hearts are closed, you have been from the start the only love I've known.
As I was going through my notes from heaven, I realized something rather interesting, and it is regarding a letter from August of 2022. I actually heard this letter being read to me on 2 different phone calls. So I found it interesting that I took similar notes, but there was like a little difference in the notes. So on the first phone call where I heard this letter from August 2022, my notes stated, "We are all connected to God. As humans, we are more like animals. We have unconscious desires that cloud us." And then months later, on the second call where I heard this exact same letter, the notes that I took on the second call said, "As humans, we are more like animals. The challenge is to see how beautiful life is." You may recall that last statement from my previous episode of Notes from Heaven, that the challenge is to see how beautiful life is. So in today's video, we're going to kind of like touch on that a little bit, but in a totally different way than we did in the last video. So let's go back to the notes from the very first call where I heard this letter. In those notes, it started with, "We are all connected to God." And then the next part said, "We as humans are more like animals. And then we have unconscious desires that cloud us." So what that is expressing is that the godly part of us, our soul, is encased in this fleshly animal body. And that's why we have all of these desires. That's why we think that we are separate from others and not one with God. So it's the lower self, it's the lower nature, it's this flesh that causes us to have clouded awareness of who we really are, of our true connection to spirit and our source. So the more we begin to create this connection with source, then the less that those unconscious desires can cloud us anymore, because we'd be living more from our higher nature. Which brings us to the notes from the second time that I heard this letter. And it said, "As humans, we are more like animals. The challenge is to see how beautiful life is." So From that same perspective, the same letter, I got slightly different notes. So the second time, rather than talking about being clouded with all of these fleshly desires, I wrote down that the challenge is to see how beautiful life is. So it's almost like seeing that statement, we as humans are more like animals, from the higher perspective rather than the lower perspective. So it's like a choice. You can choose to be focused on your lower self and the things only going on outside of you as a separate person, as a separate individual. Or you can see your interconnectedness to all things, your interconnectedness to the source, the creator. And then you can see the part that you play in everything, right? Not only that, but you start to see things from a new higher perspective rather than the lower fleshly perspective. And when you begin to see the world through that higher lens, that is when life becomes beautiful. So the whole point of those notes that I took from those 2 phone calls is that it's a choice between the lower and the higher nature, to experience life as beautiful from the higher nature or as clouded with desire from the lower nature. As humans, we are more like animals. We have unconscious desires that cloud us. Another way I like to think of it, as I was pondering this statement, was the Devil Tarot card. In the Devil Tarot card, the symbol is of your lower nature. The devil represents your lower ego and that animal part of you that has those desires that are clouding your consciousness. So with this lower self, you can sometimes be imprisoned by that lower nature. And that lower nature imprisons you through habits and desires, and all of the deadly sins like lust and greed and gluttony and all that. So if you notice, the chains around the necks of the individuals in the Devil Tarot card are actually loosened, and it seems that they are possibly willingly chained to this lower nature. So the challenge to see how beautiful life is, the challenge is to willingly step out of your lower nature and into your higher nature. As humans, we are more like animals. The challenge is to see how beautiful life is. So the statement from the second call, where I heard this letter, is more focused on seeing the perspective through the higher self. And another thing I noticed that was written throughout all of my notes from all of the letters from my grandma was the fact that love is literally what you need. You need to align with the love vibration as much as possible. And that aligns you with God. So if love aligns you with God, and that is what gives you this higher perspective to see how beautiful life is, then that is the answer to the challenge. That is like your cheat code to the universe and how to get to that higher perspective. It is to literally align yourself with love as much as possible. And that will help you to overcome the temptations of the lower self that you've been chained to for so long. Well, that about wraps it up for this video. So if you like this video, be sure to click that like button and share this video with all your friends out there. And of course, if you're a viewer but not yet a subscriber, I would just love for you to click subscribe down below. And once you have subscribed, you can turn on that notifications bell if you would like to be notified each and every time I upload a new video. Thank you guys so much for watching and spending your time with me. I love you. And I'll see you next time. Bye.